You are now live.
Okay, very good. I would like to call, it's 3:02 p.m. I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. And if we could please, Mr. Fiano, if we could have a roll call.
Sure. Freeman.
Aye.
Mobian. Malik.
Aye.
Baylor.
Aye.
Lombardo. We have all members present except for Mobian and Lombardo.
Okay, very good. And we do have a piece from last week, and I believe there has been a substitute provided. Ms. Biviano, if you would please read that in for us.
Sure. This is a substitute offered as an amendment offered by Mayor Horrigan and President Somerville. Ordinance authorizing Mayor Horrigan or his designee to accept, encumber, and expend funds allocated by the U.S. Treasury under the American Rescue Plan Act from the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund in the areas of community and youth violence prevention, housing, public utility support, local economic recovery, parks and public spaces, access to healthcare and social services, and budget stabilization, authorizing the Director of Finance or his designee to establish the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, ARPA Fund, and related actions, all in order to turn the tide on the COVID-19 pandemic, assist Akron residents hardest hit by the resulting economic and social crisis, prevent direct rate or tax increases on Akron residents and workers, create and maintain jobs in small businesses, improve public spaces and housing conditions in Akron neighborhoods, curb the rise in homicides, invest in the lives of Akron youth at greatest risk of violence, and lay the foundation for a strong and equitable recovery for the entire Akron community and declaring an emergency.
Thank you very much. And for the record, Ms. Mobian has joined us, and I would like to ask who would like to take up the conversation here and address the changes that this amendment affects.
Good afternoon, Councilman Freeman. I will start. As you know, the city is going to be receiving and has received federal funds by virtue of the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, known as ARPA. And as this body also knows, these funds are subject to federal guidelines and oversight. And last week, we introduced legislation, the purpose of which was to facilitate the acceptance and make the ARPA funds generally spendable, subject to all applicable charter provisions, including Charter 86, the Charter 86 budgeting process. In light of the discussion at committee last week regarding the legislation, an amendment has been provided so that we can make clear the intent of the legislation from the outset, perhaps which was presumed, but not as much explicit. In particular, there was confusion regarding Section 6, so that was amended to make clear that the funds are to be budgeted consistent with the charter and any other applicable laws, federal rules, regulations, and the like, including, potentially state laws, whatever applicable laws exist. If you'll note, Section 6, what it reads now is that subject to future budget ordinances and or budget amendments as set forth in the charter, any future deposits of ARPA funds the city may receive from the U.S. Treasury are hereby deemed appropriated and permitted to be expended in a manner consistent with applicable federal guidelines, regulations, the City of Akron Charter, and other applicable law. So again, as with the prior piece, this is certainly consistent with City Council's authority under the Charter, and that is the essence of the piece.
Okay, thank you so much. We will at this time open up, let me adjust the screen here. Any committee members, we'll start with committee members that would have thoughts or concerns. I'm looking around to see if I see any hands raised. Let me go to gallery view here. All right. I'm sorry, folks, I didn't see what order we were in here. So let me begin with ladies before gentlemen, if you could please. And I will, out of no particular order, Ms. Mobian, would like to acknowledge you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think, and I think we have discussed this, that because this is a totally unexpected, totally unprecedented resources that we are getting, not to deny or ignore the charter or the authority of the administration. I just think we ought to be working together on talking about these funds, how we would like to see them expended. I keep seeing things written about the mayor meeting with each council person, and I'm not aware of any of those meetings because I'm not met with the mayor and not heard of meetings that we could have. What I would like to see, and as far as I'm concerned, it could be a public meeting where we are all together in the room, and it's not to micromanage anybody, but it's to talk about where I would like to see these funds dispersed. And I realize we haven't gotten them all, and I know that they're going to come to us in the budgetary process. But even before we get to that, it would be nice to talk about where we would like to see these dollars directed, because there are some real challenging needs out there. And I think most of us can talk about the housing, the quality of the housing for some of our residents. We know that a number of things have been talked about for young people to get them out of the streets and to reduce this violence that we are experiencing. So there's just so many things that I would like to see us do with these dollars. And I know the mayor has some similar interest and direction, but it'll be nice for us to just have those conversations even before we talk about, what bucket you're going to put these in and all of that. So that is where I'm coming from, is that this is unprecedented. These are unusual dollars. We'll probably never see this kind of money again. And it would be nice to have an open discussion about where we would like to go in terms of strategic planning for these resources. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And if you'll pardon me, Miss Mosley, I will come to Councilman Malik because he is a committee member, and then I'll come to you. Thank you. Councilman Malik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know many of us have had a lot of conversations about the proposed ordinance over the last week or so. I think in my mind, these conversations have only solidified the concern that this ordinance is a blanket approval of the authority to expend these funds. Now, I think we received, last week, we received this ordinance, the initial ordinance, a few hours before our Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Today, we received a substitute 7 minutes before our Budget and Finance Committee began. And with respect to everyone involved, that does not permit enough time for us to review things and to get clarity to have thoughtful discussions. And that's part of the reason why last week's discussion was so contentious. And I'm sure that will be part of the reason why today's discussion will likely be contentious. So I can't speak to what the changes are made, although I'm glad to see that some changes have been made to Section 6. But ironically, I had written down some things, and one of the things I had said is that this is not just about legislative language, right? And the Section 1, which does not appear to have changed, still authorizes the expenditure of all of these funds before we have had the opportunity to review the proposals in any detail, right? One thing that has been made very clear through the various conversations that have been had is that there is a fundamental difference of opinion about the level of input the council should have with regard to ARPA funds, right? For the last year, and in earnest for the last 6 months, the administration has been working on their plan for the use of these funds, soliciting proposals from the community, vetting and reviewing proposals, scoring them, selecting them, interviewing grantees, potential grantees. To this point, council has received relatively little detail insofar about what these programs will be, right? Beyond the 6 broad categories that have been outlined in the State of the City and elsewhere. So my feeling has been, continues to be, that we should take a chance over the next several weeks or so to hold specific budget hearings on the first round of projects that are scheduled to be funded, to review the line items, right? To ask questions and make changes as appropriate. We can budget and authorize for those projects just like we do on the capital budget, which again is just another project-based program just like this. we can potentially have a discussion. We could have a discussion in 2 weeks on October 18th. We could have one again on October 25th. We would have time to ask questions and get them answered. We could potentially be done as early as November 1st. And then when the next round of projects is ready, we can do that again, right? I can't get enough of council meetings. And so earlier today, I was watching the special meeting that they were having up in Cleveland. They called a special meeting because a number of the council members were concerned about their process and input with regard to the use of ARPA funds. Right? And what they actually set out, as I was eating lunch, I was listening, was spending the next 4 weeks putting together council's own plan for the use of those funds, and then determining they would reconcile that with the administration's and move forward from there. I'm not suggesting anything like that, but I think it's worth noting that this is an issue that is being faced by folks across jurisdictions. Now, there's been some discussion that this isn't the usual process for how we allocate federal funds. Now, with respect, these are not usual funds, much larger allocation than we have received in the past. But secondly, we do have examples, and today we had an example in the planning committee with the ESG funds. The memo we received for $500,000 in spending of the ESG funds outlined the recipients, the services they would provide, and the amounts. And we were able to ask questions, and we did ask questions. And in fact, Councilwoman Mosley and Councilwoman Mobian asked for further information, which is going to be provided. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we should be doing here. Now, when we talk about the level of detail for ARPA, many of those details are in the appendix of the Guidehouse presentation, which we didn't get to last week. And some of them, a lot of them, as I've said here publicly, as I've said to the mayor, are great ideas that I am eager to support, like housing rehab, like investing in youth violence prevention. But some are concerning. For example, we've been talking in this committee, in this council, about Ring doorbell cameras. We're going to have a presentation at 3:30 at our public safety committee hearing about Ring doorbell cameras and about an organization that gave some of them away in Kansas City, right? We have an intern who's currently writing a memo about these camera programs. And part of that is showing that there's disputes about the effectiveness. And so when we look at the details that are present in that appendix, it shows that the plan is ostensibly to buy between 3,000 to 5,000 cameras. That's not a pilot program. And this is an example of a perfect opportunity for us to be able to review that, to ask questions about it, to ask whether that level of investment in Ring doorbell cameras is justified. But if we pass this legislation as is, those are questions that we are going to in part miss out on, right? That's the level of review that we don't get a chance to have. I strongly believe that as the elected representatives of the people of Akron, we have an obligation to have a real process that has more information and provides more input than what has been laid out. Maybe it will be messy. Maybe it's not quite as quick as in getting the money out the door. But with this amount of money, with this opportunity, I think we have to value process just as much as outcome. And I can't support what's currently going on for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malley. And next, let me come to help me out here, Sarah. I'm having problems with my screen.
I can see that Councilwoman Mosley, President Somerville, and Councilman Neal have their hands raised.
Okay. Let me go to Ms. Mosley.
Thank you, Chairman Freeman. I just want to echo all the sentiments of Councilman Malik, and also I'm concerned that we would send legislation to this council body, a duly elected council body, right before the meeting started, and then expect us to pass it. I'm sure this is not part of our charter. In fact, I do believe that we are supposed to receive legislation at a certain time, and that never happens still. Since I've come on council, it still never happens that way. I'm even further concerned that when I read just one little a red line item in here that has changed where it says that whereas the city is committed to utilizing the ARPA funds in a manner fully transparent and accessible to the public, and council will continue to have an active role in the expenditures of these funds through, hence on the through, leadership's participation in working group meetings. Leadership's participation. That has nothing to do with all of council. We're talking about the top three. I am very concerned by that. We all need to have a seat at the table with this much money coming into this city. It is unfair to each and every one of us who sit in these seats, elected the same way, to serve the same way. I would surely hope that this council body does not want to fast track this without us actually sitting and having a real meaningful conversation about what is going on in our neighborhoods, what is going on in our wards, and what we feel should be done within the wards that we were duly elected to represent. The needs in Ward 5 are not the same in Ward 8. The needs in Ward 9 are not the same in Ward 3. The needs in Ward 7 are not the same in Ward 6. I am very concerned that we would bring this in right before the meeting. I'm having a hard time believing this was just finished. It seems intentional, and that concerns me because we have to be better than this. This neighborhood live in and these communities that we serve are watching, and I'm concerned. And I do hope that we take the time where we all have a voice in this process. If I'm reading it wrong, Judge Bell fans, correct me, but that's the way it's reading to me. That
No, I just want to interject that absolutely not. You know, this was done as quickly as possible upon request. So, you know, that is coincidental of the timing, working as quickly as we could this morning. You know, so going into my day, I did not even know that I was going to be assisting in trying to draft something, to the extent that there could be some additional tweaks. For example, Councilman Malik indicated Section 1 hasn't changed. Again, implicit in all of this ordinance, and no ordinance can change the charter, is that it is subject to the budgeting processes and all other applicable laws and regulations that we could not legislate our way out of. So again, to the extent that there are things that could yet be adjusted or whatever, I assure you this was not done in the for that reason. And my understanding is, and perhaps I hope I'm not mistaken, but I think you'll have plenty of time to digest this and to you know, ask additional questions. So really the timing is coincidental, and I'm you know, again, it was prepared as quickly as possible. So, you know, as to Councilman Malik, I get that could appear that way, but this is simply not the case. We're working as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Let me come to President Somerville, if I could, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just want to make it very clear to Councilwoman Mosley, Councilman Malik, and just all of council, we are not expecting passage of this today. That is not even what we're asking for. That is not on the table, right? We do want to take our time. We want to slow walk it so that we have an opportunity to make sure that every council member gets their questions answered. And we do begin to get some feedback. Again, we're bringing this to you because, again, Councilwoman Holland, Councilman Malik, we had some great conversations on last Monday, and there were some concerns. And so we're bringing this substitute back again so that we can look at this, have some time to have further discussion, and make sure that questions are answered. So we are not asking for passage of this today. So I just want to make that very clear. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me come to Councilman Neal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just echo the sentiments of my colleagues, all of them. And I want to go back to first we have to understand the American Rescue Plan best practice that was sent down from National League of Cities. They constantly have updates on how we're supposed to go about addressing this. Guidehouse isn't going to have anything over National League of Cities. National League of Cities is where we, elected officials from across the country, are expressing our opinion to Congress and to the U.S. Treasury on how these funds should be spent. So the first thing is, out of a transparent collaboration, would be for us to walk through that document hand in hand as council with the administration. American Rescue Plan urges us to engage our citizens in the whole process. We don't have the infrastructure in place. I know we've spoken to Guidehouse, but we don't have the infrastructure in place to even start expending any funds. As far as this council passed 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, to put the budget online. That's an essential tool to track these things. And then all throughout the rescue plan, it talks about equitable investment. Folks, what do we mean when we say equitable? What metrics do we have in place to make sure that we're investing these dollars equitably? This is critical because, as Councilwoman Mosley said, the needs in our wards are different. And only those, as Councilman Malik said, that were duly elected to serve in those wards know what those wards need. Because you know what? Those of us that were elected to serve each ward, we're the ones that are going to be held accountable to make sure that our wards get their equitable share. So, you know, we use these words about collaboration, about transparency, about equity. Let's have a definition so we understand what metrics are we using. We don't even have metrics to see if we're investing equitably. And now I think we need to have at least definitions to understand what we mean when we say transparency and collaboration. So again, I agree with my colleagues. The beautiful thing is I believe the U.S. Treasury pushed back the October date. I'm not sure what it is, but I believe they did push it back. Again, my suggestion is that we walk through the American Rescue Plan document, best practice document. I'd even be willing, I serve on the CED committee. Mike Wallace is over the federal. Has been educated legislators. Be happy to bring those folks in to talk to us. When I say us, I'm saying council as well as administration, so that we can make sure that we do this right. Because another part of this that is strongly urged is that we document our work in such a way, and I believe Guy House mentioned this, in such a way, not just for us, but so that future generations could come back and see how we invested these dollars. And if I may, last Monday, I believe there was a question asked that was never answered. What are we paying Guidehouse? I read in the paper today, it's an hourly rate. What is that hourly? We're paying them by the hour. What is the hourly rate? And what do we have budgeted? And since it's coming out of American Rescue Plan dollars, should we have discussed exactly what that cap would be before we started allocating those funds? These are just questions that if we're truly collaborating and being transparent so that all have an understanding on what we're doing, we wouldn't have these questions because we would have talked openly and we would already have the answers because we all would have been a part of that process. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. I'm looking to see if I have any other comments here. I do not see any other hands. Yes, I do see Councilwoman Holland. Please. Please proceed, Councilwoman Holland. I think you're muted. There we go.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much. I'd like to join my colleagues, council members Mosley, Malik, Amobian, and Neal, and also to express my specific appreciation for the remarks of Council President Somerville. I have so many thoughts, but in the interest of time, I would echo most of what was already said. By federal rule, we have until 2024 to make decisions about this once in a generation, unprecedented funding, and until 2026 to spend it. While the spending ideas that were published in this morning's Beacon Journal were not previously sent to all council members by the private consulting firm Guidehouse, we do have this. We have a little more information than we had this time last week. And so, however tumultuous the past week has been, however difficult certain moments may have been, in a sense, we did what we were meant to do, and we have incrementally some success here. We have more information. And what this demonstrates is the value of asking questions and seeking information and exchanging it. As Councilman Malik said, democracy is messy. It is. Questions and calls for more process and more transparency and greater understanding can feel combative, and they can be uncomfortable. But that doesn't make process and transparency any less important. I believe that we need the process that we are all essentially asking for, and I'm grateful for the conversation, even when it's hard. I also appreciate what's represented in the offer of amended language. I do, however, specifically wish to join my colleagues in expressing some concern that amendments would be offered just 7 minutes before the commencement of the committee meeting. I do look forward to spending some time with the amendments, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman Holland. And I would like to go to Ms. Goodrich, please.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, Councilwoman Holland, that as soon as committee was over last week, we sent that presentation, the Guidehouse presentation with the appendixes, to Sarah Viviano to be circulated out to all of council last Monday. We obviously wanted you to all have that document and be able to review it and see the projects that were in that document. So I believe, Sarah, did you send that out to council? But the goal was to get that to you guys so those could be reviewed.
Thank you. I'm looking around for hands. I do not see any other further questions or
Mr. Chair, I can see that Councilman
comments.
Malik has his hand raised.
I'm sorry. Okay. Councilman Malik.
I believe Mr. Neal had a question about Guidehouse that I believe has not been addressed. Would someone from the finance department be able to address it?
Yes, absolutely. We're also gathering those documents to be shared with council, the Guidehouse contract, which states the hourly rate for each individual of Guidehouse's team. So I will be emailing that to everyone, hopefully by the end of today, as well as all the RFQ responses that we got when we put the RFQ out in June. So, be looking out for that, as I will be distributing that this afternoon.
Thank you. And I know it has been said, it was made clear last week that whatever goes out to a Guidehouse does come from out of the funds, not directly out of our operating. We just don't have an idea of how much the contract perhaps might be. Not that anybody knows that yet, but
correct. It's time and materials. So it depends on how much we need their assistance and how much we can take on ourselves here in the city. So it's a need-based cost, especially as we put the audit and compliance structures in place so that we can adequately account for these funds.
Mm-hmm. Those of us have been on council 20 years, those of us have been on council, 20 days or however long you've been on, Ms. Holland. This is all new. This is new territory for all of us when it comes to these kinds of dollars and the way they're coming in. So do we have any other comments? I do not want to miss anyone. And okay. If no one else has anything to add, do I have a motion to continue to take time on this and refer it to future agenda?
So move. So move.
Okay, I have a motion to refer. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, a motion and a second to refer. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, we're going to be seeing some more information coming forth, and I know we're going to continue to have conversations. Thank you to everyone what you provided. And Sarah, I believe that's all we have on our agenda, is it not?
For budget and finance, yes. Mhm. Are you
Are we
ready
done?
to?
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will call the meeting to close at 3:30. We'll call the meeting to adjourn at 3:32. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final committee of the day is the Special Committee for Reimagining Public Safety. Madam Chair, are you ready? I think you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, we're
That's
ready.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, ready when you are.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting for Reimagining Public Safety to order. At this time, I'm going to ask if our clerk will read the roll.
Somerville,
Aye.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Holland,
Aye.
Hamer, Lombardo, McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Mosley,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian.
Aye.
All members are present except for Kamer and Lombardo.
Thank you so much. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. Prior to council going on recess, council collectively came together and was charged to really bring forth solutions, things that we could do as a body to help curb gun violence that is impacting our city in a tremendous way. And so we said that when we came back from recess, we will begin to continue these conversations and unpack them a little bit more, so we could collectively really try to figure out what is our role as council to help make our community safer. And so on today, we're going to be really talking about technology, how we can better use technology, actually cameras, right, to help deter crime. And so I know that we do have a couple of guests with us. And so is Mr. Damon Daniels on with us by chance?
Madam Chair, I don't see that, but I do see that Brian Lard is here.
Okay. So what we'll probably do, we will start with our second presentation first, maybe to give Mr. Daniels a little bit more time to get on. Mr. Daniels is actually a program director for a violence prevention program in Kansas City. It was his nonprofit that actually piloted a program and partnered with Ring Doorbell Camera to distribute, I think it was about 750 Ring Doorbell cameras in Kansas City. And so we were actually going to have him come and just kind of talk to us a little bit about the program that they implemented there in Kansas City. So we're going to give him a little bit more time to get on. So in the meantime, we're going to move to our second presentation. And I'm going to actually allow Councilwoman Holland to set us up for this conversation, because this is one of the proposals that she brought to us, Project Nola. Councilwoman Holland.
Thank you so much, Madam President. As we're aware, in every American city right now, the use of video surveillance is going on. It's being used or it's being studied as a way to support traditional law enforcement efforts, and specifically to fight the rising tide of gun violence, which is, essentially unbridled everywhere. It can be an extremely useful tool. Cameras are used increasingly by both private property owners and businesses, but also as a tool to supplement traditional law enforcement efforts and techniques. When I arrived here at the end of June, I immediately felt that push, that interest and potential utility for this as a way to supplement our outstanding Akron Police Department in a way that could be helpful, meaningful, and cost efficient. I also came at it from my own background and area of interest in terms of taking a kind of a deep dive and examining the inevitable need to look and balance the efficiency and effectiveness from a law enforcement legitimate goals perspective, but also the human citizen concerns that would naturally arise when we're talking about what amounts to government surveillance. I was interested in, privacy issues and how do we feel about and how do we go about using cameras as a way of making the community safer without making the community less free. So in doing this research, I kept coming back to sort of a set of guiding principles that are of interest and seem relevant and relatable to this balancing. And this in turn led me to Project Nola. I'm looking forward to hearing what Mr. Lagarde has to say. Project Nola in a nutshell is a dynamic nonprofit that is housed at the University of New Orleans. That very simple structure right there gives the operation all kinds of interesting advantages and independence. Mr. Lagarde is the executive director of this operation, which has video camera systems set up in a number of both private and public settings, including cities that are of comparable size and comparable need level as our beautiful city. He is a criminologist, he is a former police officer, and has been kind enough to give us some of his time and some of his insights and be available to us to answer questions today. So with no further ado, I give you Mr. Lagarde from Project Nola.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm Brian Lagarde, and as mentioned, I'm the executive director of Project Nola. We started Project Nola approximately 10 years ago after Hurricane Katrina. We lost a lot of police officers. We lost housing, we lost police officers. We needed a force multiplier, something to very quickly get us back up to speed with crime reduction, and it worked extraordinarily well. Before the pandemic, we actually helped reduce the homicide rate here in New Orleans to the lowest it's been since the 1970s. Our program is known to be the most cost efficient in existence. It's time proven of over 10 years. We're also the most successful crime camera program in the country. How we do things here is extremely different than how your traditional crime camera program is usually run. First of all, we're a nonprofit organization that runs the National Real-Time Crime Center here at the University of New Orleans. We use the grant money and the donations that we receive to actually purchase the cameras. That way, the people that we help, they don't have to purchase the equipment unless they want to for some reason. Most people do not because we're loaning it out to them. The equipment that we loan out is extremely top-of-the-line equipment. It usually is designed to last about 10 years. We receive a warranty period of 5 years. We're able to see extremely long distances away. For example, where we have the cameras on the Atlantic and Pacific and seaboards and the Gulf Coast, we're able to actually see miles out to the curvature of the earth. Same exact cameras that we use inside of cities to help monitor crime. We're able to do anything from maritime enforcement from miles away to see if there's a distressed boater. In Colorado, our cameras, the sheriff's office might use them mostly for crime abatement. But if someone is reported missing on a mountain somewhere, they can spin the cameras around and look up and see if they see somebody waving their arms from many miles away. It's how well the cameras work. We much prefer to put the cameras on people's homes, businesses, churches, schools, but we can also put them on poles. Putting the cameras on homes, churches, it gets the community involved. It's not just a city crime camera program, it's a community crime camera program where everyone's involved. There's many advantages to putting the cameras on people's homes, businesses, churches, and schools. We use a very small portion of their upstream bandwidth, which is the part of your internet that you typically don't use. You're using your downstream bandwidth and you're watching Hulu, Netflix, processing credit cards as a business, whatnot. So we're using a very small portion of what people aren't normally using in the first place. But it makes it where the municipality doesn't have to pay for that. So normally when you have a crime camera program, you're having to pay for your utilities, your power, and then your internet. So doing it this way, you don't have to. We're also getting the same views, if not better, by putting cameras on people's homes, businesses, churches, and schools. So it's more reliable. It costs the municipality far less. Now, if given no choice, if you don't have a home or a business or a church or a school nearby to put a camera on, then you can go ahead and put it on a pole. You just go ahead and you work with your local utility company and your local internet service provider or mobile data, whoever y'all have it through, whether it be T-Mobile, Verizon, to get a mobile data plan for the camera, and then you're able to put them anywhere you like. So the cameras, they see extremely well. They go in areas where they're needed the most. What we're typically doing here is all the camera streams, they come into our building here at the University of New Orleans, where we run our own private data center. No one else has access to it. So our technicians here have access to the feeds, and then we're able to go ahead and rebroadcast it to local law enforcement. We have around 10,000 cameras around the United States feeding into communities, into sheriff's offices, police departments all across the country. What we really prefer to do here is to help out with the violent crimes. It's honestly what we're good at. We're constantly monitoring for illegal carrying of firearms by gang members, drug distribution. We get to know people pretty well as far as the repeat violent offenders. We also like to be able to help identify juveniles at risk and to help bring in them into whatever programs might be available locally. Go ahead and again, break the cycle of violence. We're able to help reduce, very significantly help reduce violent crime by, we target the repeat offenders. We're not just going after, for example, the street level drug dealers. We want to go above that. We want to go to the people who are supplying them, the people who are controlling them. The enforcers are the ones that are actually carrying the firearms, and help local law enforcement make cases on those individuals. We don't necessarily like to see people go to jail, but in some cases, some people need to go to jail to get them off the street because they're extremely violent people who are harming the rest of the community. Those that we can help, we love to help, to go ahead and again, especially juveniles at risk, go ahead and to bring them into programs. We spend a great deal of our time, again, monitoring for the gang violence. We're able to, in many cases, it happens quite often, where we see gang members racking the slides on their pistols and jumping into a car and getting ready to go somewhere. And we make notifications. That car then gets pulled over before the next shooting has the occasion to happen. It's a pretty routine occurrence over here because of all we're watching. So please, any questions that y'all might have, we've been doing this for a long time. We've seen what works best. And just to also make some points here. Here in New Orleans, for example, we have 5,000 cameras. So those are 5,000 cameras that are in people's homes, businesses, churches, and schools that are paid for by individuals, individual homeowners, business owners, associations, whatnot. It's not paid for by the city of New Orleans. Now, in addition to that, there are approximately 330 cameras, crime cameras, that are paid for by the city of New Orleans. So one of the things that we like to do is, there's the cameras that the city might go ahead and arrange through us, but there's probably going to be the many more cameras that individuals are going to want for their homes and their businesses that isn't going to cost the municipality any money, but it's going to go on the screens of your police departments. So it's not going to cost you any money. The cameras here, since we literally loan them and you don't have to worry about purchasing equipment, what we worry about is how much it costs us to receive, record, and then rebroadcast a particular video feed back to law enforcement. And that's as little as $300 for if a person who has a home wants to host a camera. That's all it can cost them. Anything that anyone pays us, since we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and the cameras help benefit public service and local law enforcement as a whole, is tax deductible. So the very little bit that a person might pay us is tax deductible. So please, any questions that y'all might have, fire away.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lagarde. So we'll open up with Councilwoman Mosley.
Thank you, President Somerville. Is it Mr. Lagarde? I want to make sure I'm saying your name right.
Yes, thank you.
Questions for you. I read an article where you all have installed cameras in Hattiesburg. Is that Mississippi?
Yes, it is.
If you could talk to us a little bit about that, then I have another question after that.
Sure. Actually, quite a few cities in Mississippi come to mind: Hattiesburg, Natchez, Biloxi, Ocean Springs, and honestly, the list kind of goes on. So I believe in Hattiesburg, that actually started with the business community that made the introduction. They also found out about us through our work with reducing violent crime in Natchez, Mississippi. A lot of times these things travel word of mouth. Police chief or sheriff hears about how we helped reduce crime, say 80, close to 90% in a different community. For example, again, this started in Natchez. Natchez, we were called because the police chief said they just had the worst, most murderous year on record. We helped within 1 year. It was around close to 90% violent crime reduction. We did that by putting the cameras in the areas of greatest need, identifying the gang leaders, and then one by one, we helped work up cases on them because they were doing extremely bad things. And then Hattiesburg found out about it. From Hattiesburg, the Adams County Sheriff's Office, which is where they're located, and it just kind of went from there.
So outside of Hattiesburg, if you could tell us other municipalities that have contracted with Nola, and what is the average cost? Because I noticed on there they talk about an installation fee and an annual fee. If you could talk to us about other municipalities or townships who have your cameras and what those installation and annual fees look like.
The fees are pretty, everything is pretty well set. We just charge what basically our cost. So it doesn't make a difference how many cameras a community might need. We just go by what it cost us. As far as communities are concerned, we help everyone from Los Angeles County on the West Coast to multiple cities on the East Coast. So it's quite extensive. For the cameras that go on people's homes, I mentioned earlier, that can be as little as $300 a year for us to receive and record. So for example, if you wanted to host a camera on your house where it's coming out of your pocket, it could cost you as little as $300 to go ahead and host that camera. You have access to it, we have access to it, and then we broadcast it over to your local police department as well. The more common camera that we do is $400 a year. That's where you start getting the cameras with the red and blue lights on it. The cameras can tell the difference between people, vehicles, animals, trees swaying in the wind, and it can notify you as the homeowner if someone comes on your property or someone goes up to your vehicle in your driveway to go pull your door handle. You can actually have a two-way audio conversation similar to, I heard you mention, I should say Ring doorbell was mentioned earlier. So it kind of does like what Ring does, just a lot better. A Ring doorbell is designed to be able to see who's at your front doorstep, but not necessarily help you with the crime that happens down the street or across the street, whereas our cameras are designed for not only helping to protect you, but helping to protect the entire community. They're just higher definition. We use different lenses to see further out. So the cameras with the red and blue flashing lights also have built-in forensic gunshot detection. Those are as little as $400 a year. When it comes to municipalities, when it's a municipality getting cameras from us, it's almost always one of our auto tracking pan tilt zoom cameras. That's a camera that can see 360 degrees for miles on end, as long as the view is unobstructed. Realistically, in a city environment, we might be able to see a couple of blocks before we hit a tree somewhere or a building. So those particular cameras, again, they can be outfitted with gunshot detection, blue and red lights. What it does is kind of hard to describe. The camera, it's constantly circling around and it's looking for people, or if we wanted to, it looks for vehicles. And randomly, when it sees a person, for so many seconds, go zoom in on that person, get a much better face shot, and then zoom back out. So that person could be hundreds of feet away. So a traditional camera, like a Ring doorbell or your typical camera on a business, it might be good for 15, 20 feet to identify a person. Our one camera can do 360-degree, for example, in a park, in a parking lot, and we're able to get really good face shots of people who are hundreds of feet away, regardless of lighting conditions. Day, night doesn't make a difference to these cameras. We're typically able to see, for example, when someone might adjust a concealed weapon so well that a lot of times we can identify the make and model of that weapon. We can see if it has a drum or extended magazine or whatnot. So if we're making notifications to local law enforcement, we're not only able to provide a full and accurate clothing description, but also a vehicle description, license plate, of course, if we have an angle on the license plate, and then all the way down to what type of weapon that person might be carrying.
Thank you so much.
One more, just one more.
Okay,
And
sure.
so when you talk about the installation, is this per camera? Like once they put the installation in, this is per camera, the installation fee? So you're saying, for example, if a camera on City Hall, we're paying per camera for installation fees, correct?
That is actually not correct. So we're not an installation company. We provide the equipment. We run the cloud here in our building and train police officers. So by the way, we do have on the top floor of our building, we actually have guest lodging for police officers, deputy sheriffs to come in should they wish to come to New Orleans to be trained. Otherwise, we remotely train them. And that's no additional cost. But we do not get involved in the installation of the cameras. The cameras are very easy to install. In some places, like in Hattiesburg, they actually do it themselves. Biloxi, Mississippi, they do it themselves. Natchez, Mississippi, they use a private contractor. And so it just really depends. So in your case, I'm sure there's actually lots of IT professionals there, whether you use your own Department of Public Works or members of your police department to go ahead and put the cameras up, or you use a private contractor. It really depends. Like for cameras that might go in a person's home, we might see a private contractor charge anywhere from $150 to $200 for that. The pan tilt zoom cameras, a lot of times they're more inclined to go on commercial structures and on poles, which does usually take more time to go ahead and install. So we might see more, somewhere around $300 to $400 per hand tilt zoom camera, and that's something that would go through a private contractor if you're not using the Department of Public Works or your police department to put the cameras up.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Holland?
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Lagarde, you and I talked before a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yes.
And during that conversation, which I really enjoyed, we had a good discussion about differences between your system and others that would be of the kind of scale that we'd be talking about, either for a pilot program for a city like Akron, some segment of it, or, a bigger size. And we got into a really interesting conversation about proprietary cloud storage, non-proprietary cloud storage. And I'm realizing as we're talking here that might be useful if you could give my colleagues, I guess, a basic understanding of what we're talking about when we're talking about limited time cloud storage, why it matters, and what the difference is between your system and some of the others that are out there that belong to for-profit organizations.
Okay, absolutely. So we actually built our own data center. We mainly built it so that we could make it better than other commercial-based crime camera programs. Frankly, we needed to be able to have better recorded video. So when a crime occurs, you're looking at everything from shoelaces on shoes to tattoos to jewelry to watches. A lot of times there's no license plate on a vehicle, so you need to map out the dents and the dings on a vehicle. To do that, you have to have superior recordings. And that was the main reason why we actually built our own data center. With our data center, we're able to actually record above, it's actually was referred to as 8K, whereas most every commercial, like Genetech is the largest one. They use Amazon AWS along with a lot of other people. And the maximum is only 1080p. So we're able to shoot somewhere around 12 times higher definition than your typical crime camera. And when crimes occur, the better the video, obviously forensically, the better you can go ahead and analyze and make sure you're getting the right person. Now with that also came privacy. So for example, I can tell you there's 5 of us that have access to our actual data center. No one else has access to our physical data center. With respect to companies like Amazon or anyone that uses the Amazon AWS cloud platform to create their own system, Amazon AWS, there's likely thousands of technicians that have access to those data centers. So that's one thing, honestly, that kind of scares us as far as from a privacy standpoint. So the less people who have access to the video, obviously, the more you can lock down that video and keep it private and protect people's privacy. When we first started the system, we asked people, what do you want? What do you want us to do? What do you don't want us to do? And people very quickly said, we don't want to see you be like London or Chicago, where the cameras are recorded for months and months and years. So the raw video footage, the things that are happening right now, just the raw footage, usually we have it set to a 14-day rotation. If there's no crime, there's no reason to keep the video footage. It's going to be automatically erased and overwritten in just a couple of weeks' time. Now, when there is a crime, either law enforcement pulls that video or we pull the video and send it to law enforcement, then it goes into the court system and there is evidence for decades, until it's physically destroyed by the court system once that evidence is finished with. So we just do all these different things to go ahead and protect the video. Now, also as a nonprofit, non-governmental entity, we are not subject to open records request. So one of the things we also like about this is with traditional crime camera programs, a lot of times you have to have the means for open records request where someone can pull video down. Again, that's a little bit scary because if someone wants to demand video from a camera outside of a mosque, or if they're stalking somebody and they want the camera down the street from the person that they're stalking, or whatever the case might be, obviously you don't want the camera video to get in people's hands for nefarious reasons. Since we're a nonprofit organization, we're non-governmental, we're not subjected to open records requests. We receive them all the time from paparazzi, attorneys, things like that. And it's something that we do not have to abide by. So we're able to help protect that video and make sure it's only used for law enforcement purposes.
Super. Now, when you set up a system for a municipality, do you provide, is there an insurance option or a servicing, repair, replacement option for equipment?
So the cameras, we usually see them last about 10 years. And we really don't have, the only time we see cameras, and it's rare. I mean, again, we have over 10,000 cameras. If they're struck by lightning just right, there's no protecting a camera struck by lightning. We've only had one camera shot in all of our years, which I know is very surprising. And that was in Mississippi. And that camera to this day still works. So it's got a crack in the lens, but it still works. And it was shot about 3 years ago. So we have cameras, including our own here in New Orleans. We just had Ida. We've had other hurricanes. We've also, our cameras have also been hit by hurricanes on the East Coast. So we have cameras in Florida. But just using that as an example, they're very extremely hardy cameras. Very little actually can knock them out. But if something were to knock them out, then basically the camera gets shipped back over to us and replace it. So it's just as easy as that.
Okay, thank you so much. Councilwoman Amobian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you answered my question. I was curious as to where are these cameras positioned on someone's home? And how do you protect them from someone, destroying them or shooting them or whatever to get rid of them if they know that they exist?
Well, the first thing we do is, a lot of people, they want to host a crime camera because there's problems nearby. So whether it be drug distribution, just illegal carrying of firearms, things like that. So the first thing we do is we work with law enforcement to go ahead and to help identify the repeat offenders, especially, and try to break the cycle of violence by getting them picked up. So if a person who is inclined to shoot that camera out is arrested before they have the opportunity to shoot that camera out, they're not going to be able to shoot that camera out. The other thing is if someone is foolish enough to shoot one of these cameras out, like for example, the one I mentioned earlier, that was specifically Natchez, Mississippi. And probably about 5 minutes after they pulled the trigger, it was two juveniles. Those two juveniles were arrested. And so, we didn't have any problems anymore in all of Natchez, Mississippi, because the word got out that someone actually shot one of our cameras, and they were arrested 5 minutes later. So it is very rare here in New Orleans. Probably one of the toughest areas that we have is it's a historic area of the city where it's mandated where we can put the cameras and where we can't put the cameras for historical purposes, and they're very low. I mean, we're talking like in the French Quarter, you can literally walk up to some of our cameras and put your hands on it. And something that has really greatly surprised us is not one of them has been tagged with graffiti. Again, we've been doing this for 10 years, and not a single one of our cameras tagged with graffiti. So usually most people, a sane, rational person knows it's not a good idea to walk up to a camera and do something foolish to it when it can see extremely so well. Especially the case with our auto tracking cameras, because forgive me if I didn't make this point earlier, but the cameras automatically move themselves. So when it sees a person, not only can it zoom in on that person, but it's also going to track that person. So if that person walks over to the right, the camera's going to follow them to the right. If the person walks over to the left, then the camera's going to physically are going to see the camera head moving. So it very greatly helps modify criminal behavior. So if you look up and you see a camera head actually turning and looking at you, it just makes it where you really have to be not rational to want to do something on one of these cameras.
So why would the camera move and follow you? Help me understand that.
The cameras, the auto tracking pan tilt zoom cameras, it can tell the difference between a person, a vehicle, a stray animal, a tree swaying in the wind. Specifically, can identify what a person looks like. It's going to basically 2 arms, 2 legs, and so when it detects a person, the camera will very closely zoom in on that person. And then as that person is walking down the street, the camera will track that person for so many seconds. So normally we'll set that to 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and then it goes right back to its wide angle view. And it basically starts looking around for another person to zoom in on. How that's so greatly beneficial is even if somebody is far away, let's say, the bad thing happens 200, 300 feet away, someone is shot. There's a good chance that if that gunman, if they were walking around the area at some point, that camera would have zoomed in on them before the incident, during the incident, or as they're fleeing from the incident.
So let me ask you that. Oh, sorry, Madam President. Let me ask you this. You said of all these cameras that you have all in these states, there are only 5 people that have access to the data?
Here, again, because we have our data center is in this building that I'm sitting in right here. So there's only 5 of us that have the keys to that room. So now each community, like the sheriff's office in Adams County, they have access to all their feeds, so they can see just theirs. In Hattiesburg, as you mentioned, the Hattiesburg Police Department has access to those feeds and those feeds only. We're the only ones here that have access to all the feeds because the servers physically live in this building with us. So we're the only ones. Now, in the case of like Amazon, which is the platform that most commercial entities build their services upon, there's thousands of technicians and possibly hundreds of cities that have access to the raw data that they host on their cloud service. I'm just comparing us to how that works. So with us, it's very greatly locked down. Hardly anybody has access to the actual videos.
I'm just curious, since you mentioned Ocean Springs, Biloxi, have you gotten to Pascagoula and Moss Point, Mississippi?
Pascagoula, we're talking to Pascagoula right now. Moss Point. So are you from there?
I was born in Pascagoula and I lived in Moss Point.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so we're Gulfport, that entire area. We're also we recently received a federal grant to put license plate recognition cameras up in the entire area. So it's something that we apply for the DOJ grant with the city. It was sponsored by Project Nola and the city of Biloxi, but it's actually going to be Ocean Springs, Gulfport, Biloxi, and then it's the whole region to go ahead and to put LPR cameras up. But that's obviously something different. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, thank you so much. Councilman Fusco, and then Councilwoman Holland, you'll be next.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Thank you for the presentation. Certainly appreciate it. You had mentioned before the police training. I apologize if you've already commented on it because I had to step out for a second. But if you have not, I'd like to hear a little bit about that piece of it, as well as I believe you had mentioned something about the access from the community. Was that, or did I hear it wrong? So I'd like to hear a little bit about that. Thank you.
Okay, so no worries. Let me ask you a question. When you say access by the community, what are you referring to? Well, let me see if I'll try to answer that. And if it's not, if it's not the question, if I'm not answering the question you just asked, or
is there access from the community? Is there ways that people can view or? So
we'll start with that. A person that hosts a crime camera. So let's say you host a camera yourself. You contact us. You arrange for a camera on your house. You're going to have access to that camera or cameras on your house, but you're not going to have access to your neighbor's cameras or someone else's cameras. Now, we provide username and passcodes. So if we provide you with your username and passcode, and then say you want to go ahead and provide that to a relative that can also keep an eye on your house. Say, for example, if you're vacationing it out of country or something like that, it's your password. You can go ahead and provide it to someone else. But you're going to only have access to your camera. Now, let's say you're a business owner. You have several businesses, and each business gets a camera. You would be able to see all of the cameras on all of those businesses, the camera on your house. But then again, you're not going to be able to see anything else. Now, law enforcement, they're able to see everything. So the portal that we provide law enforcement, and this is going to kind of go to the training aspect, it's really easy to use. There really isn't much need for training. Imagine there's a map. You can go ahead and you can draw a square on a map. It'll pull up automatically all the cameras in that particular area. We make it extremely easy to pull up crime camera video and to go ahead and to review recorded footage or live footage from multiple cameras simultaneously. It's all extremely easy to do. Normally what we're teaching here is best practices, how to best make use of the crime cameras, how to best analyze the crime cameras. And then for those municipalities that are going to install the cameras themselves, a lot of times they'll send whoever is going to be responsible for that down here. They stay upstairs. We don't charge for lodging for the education that we provide. And clearly, we're located at a university for a reason. We're also here to educate as well. So normally, when we go live in a new area, we'll take remote desktop a view of a particular computer at a police department, and then do remote training that way. where we're controlling the computer, speaking via speakerphone or Zoom-like meeting, and where we're able to show this is how you do whatever with the camera system. So it's very easy to use.
So can it also be on a phone?
Absolutely.
Access to the video footage and such.
iPhone, iPad, Droid tablet, Windows. So yes, absolutely.
So obviously, from a policing standpoint, they can have almost live.
It is live, yeah. It is 100% live. So whether they want to see live or playback. Now, normally responding units, we usually find most municipalities, it's the rank and an only rank that has access to the videos. Again, that goes to privacy, but it's also practicality. You don't want your police officers driving police cars and looking at screens at the same time. So not to mention when there's a bad thing. So, you know, a shooting just came out or a robbery or anything. Those responding officers are, you know, the main thing they're going to do is secure the scene. They're really not that interested in seeing the camera footage themselves. Not at that instant, because they're just needed to make that scene safe. But the detectives, their rank. So what we really find that works best is when your dispatch center, your 911 dispatch center, because when we're looking at cameras and we see something that meets the criteria that your local law enforcement wants us to go ahead and call a dispatcher direct on, it's really nice to be able to say, do you see the camera as such and such, whatever? And, you know, we're controlling the camera. We're zoomed in on, let's say, a waistband of a person, and we see the weapon. Now, legally, you know, most places, and forgive me, I don't know how it is in Ohio, but most places it's legal to open carry. So usually there's certain things that we're looking for, where it's a weapon in a known gang member, weapon in a known felon, a weapon in drug distribution in progress, weapon in dangerous behavior, where the person's agitated and we see that they have a weapon. So when those criteria met, we make the notifications, and it's great for the dispatcher to be able to look up while we're controlling the camera, see what we see. It helps them keep their hands clear. They just look up at the screen and they can be typing on their computer dispatch units. So your homicide division, narcotics especially, we're probably going to get to know your narcotics officers really, really, really well. If you have a separate gang abatement, we're going to probably get to know them extremely well too.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate Council Representative Holland. I know she's been working hard on this, and we've had several conversations about this particular program. I think it's worth continuing to pursue and continuing to discuss. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Holland?
Thanks, Council President. I just guess I want to just say this. It's interesting how the conversation has evolved today, because I have really looked at Project Nola and your system as being primarily for discrete little commercial areas around our city. And so today I find that we're talking a lot about residential area. And obviously the system lends itself to a number of different kinds of settings. I guess what I'm interested in understanding, let's say that we have a mixed residential commercial area, and we have the capacity either through, you know, a license from a utility pole, or, you know, let's say a public building of some sort or a commercial building, we could conceivably mount a camera on the exterior of a non-residential building and achieve monitoring of a considerable amount of space that would cover, you know, commercial area, business area, but also residential area, but all of it public area. Could you give us an idea of how far the reach is under this kind of, you know, scenario?
As long as there's line of sight, we can see. Now we can see for miles, but within cities, you know, it's going to be until we hit a tree or some type of obstruction. That might be a couple of blocks away. So it just depends. But is with the auto tracking pan tilt zoom cameras, they're able to spin around 360 degrees. Now, a single camera can cover multiple city blocks in each direction. If put it at an intersection and there aren't many trees around, then we have that clear line of sight. We can do that. Some of the other things, I'm thinking back, especially now that you and I are talking, you were asking me about some differences. Some of the very important practical things is like we prefer to provide new cameras, but we can also connect to, we refer to it as third-party cameras. We don't really like to push that for like if a business already has cameras. The problem with that is a lot of times the cameras are not facing, or like they might be facing inward, but not necessarily outwards towards the street. We find a lot of times they're really not that good quality, and it's frankly not worth the time to go ahead and connect to them. But in situations where someone might have strategically placed decent cameras, we can bring those into our network. Now, there's certain limitations with that to be able to go ahead and to bring in third-party cameras. There's, for example, we were introduced to a company named Fusus by the Biloxi Police Department. We invited them here along with the Biloxi Police Department. They actually asked us to bring them in. And we wanted to see if there's something we can do to work together and possibly use their platform to bring in third-party cameras. The limitation, and the same goes for Fusus, is you have to have the means to go ahead and to grab the cameras at a particular location. So we have a box, we're able to provide it to a business. It's able to absorb the video signals from that particular place. But Fusus has the same technology, but it's a lot more work to bring in third-party cameras. And then a lot of times it's just not really worth it. Now, the way that Fusus does it is in some respects different. They record at the edge. We record here to our cloud. It makes a very large difference when law enforcement are accessing the video. So let's say, for example, you have 20 cameras at a convenience store or a school or an apartment complex, and something bad happens, and law enforcement wants to pull, like, let's say 10. Right now, we need to see what happened 5 minutes ago. Someone's on the ground shot. They need to go ahead and see, whatever number of cameras from that particular location. They're at the mercy of how fast that apartment complex might be able to stream the video from those 10 cameras. Realistically, it can take a long time to pull video that way. I'm talking hours to pull video from multiple cameras. The way that we do it is the cameras, they all come here to our center, and then law enforcement is actually pulling it over a 10 gig fiber city feeder line. So it is instant, it's literally at the speed of light. So we much prefer, to use our own cameras because they're just so much better. We're able to see so much further. One of the technologies that we really like to use here is the forensic gunshot detection, where we're able, the camera's able to, actually, I don't know if y'all seen on the homepage of our website, projectnola.org, we have to pretty much blur it all out. To basically redact the material for obvious privacy reasons. But imagine if you have a camera that's focusing and looking at an intersection. And in this particular case, I'm thinking of a person shot. The moment that first gunshot rings out, the camera turns 180 degrees and is looking right into the face of the gunman. So that particular instance, the one that's on our website, that was actually Natchez, Mississippi. So the camera was able to go ahead and turn around. It was a juvenile, regrettably, and his mama turned him in when the police department released that video to local media for identification, helping identify this perpetrator. His mama brought him in. And so it's a lot of more things that we can do by, we created the system ourselves. It's not a for-profit scenario. So we're just only focusing on what works really well and getting that technology to law enforcement into communities across the country.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Mr. Lagarde. I must say this has been a great conversation. This information has been very informative. Again, I echo Councilwoman Holland. It's good to know that this is something we can use in our residential areas and placing them on homes. So that is really great information. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I know that we do have our second presenter online with us, Mr. Daniel. Can you hear us?
Yes, good afternoon.
Okay, great. Welcome. Thank you so much. I did have the opportunity to share with council that you partnered with Ring Doorbell Camera to create a pilot program there in Kansas City. So we would just love to hear what it is that you guys did in Kansas City.
Sure, and good afternoon to the rest of the council, and thank you for having me. Just before I dive into that, I'll just share just briefly a little bit about Ad Hoc Group Against Crime. As well. I am the president of the organization, and we've been serving the Kansas City area since 1977. So we're a nonprofit organization, and for some, we are the emergency room for social services, and for others, we're the trusted bridge between the community and the criminal justice system. So we provide a range of services. At the core, we provide victim services for individuals and families impacted by crime and violence. But in a nutshell, it's really about how we deliver healing and justice to those impacted as well. And so with that, we provide a variety of services that range from free grief counseling to minor home repair to neighborhood block watch trainings, things of that nature. And so this opportunity was presented to us by actually Congressman Cleaver, Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver office reached out to us for assistance in this partnership with Amazon Ring. In addition to Kansas City, Missouri Police Department was also a part of the endeavor. And so they reached out to us, as I mentioned, Ad Hoc has been serving the Kansas City area for over 40 years. And so we are deeply rooted in the community, and we're able to reach out to several neighborhoods. The goal for us was sort of threefold. One, of course, around reducing violence, particularly crime. And I always really try to pinpoint, as we talk about reducing crime, is really around opportunity crimes. So reducing opportunity crimes, increasing communication and tips regarding crimes. And then in addition to that, just increasing a sense of safety in high crime areas as well. And so we partnered with Amazon Ring to distribute 1,500 cameras to much needed neighborhoods that are plagued by violence. And so we chose those neighborhoods. It ended up being about 25 neighborhoods that we chose based on the stats that they had. And please let me know if you all can hear me as well. Now, I apologize. I am working remotely today. And so I have some folks doing some work on my house. So they're a little bit in and out. So you may hear the actual chime, which is Amazon Ring chime as well. So excuse the background noise. But yeah, so we worked with them to distribute 1,500 Ring doorbell cameras to about 25 neighborhoods that had high rates of crime and violence. And I would say that one of the ways in which we chose those neighborhoods not only was because of the crime stats, but also making sure that these were neighborhoods that were organized, at least organized to a point where either they had neighborhood associations and they were active, and or had some local leaders that could be identified that were also very active in the community as well. And we thought that was important for a number of reasons. Number one, because every neighborhood is different depending on where you are in the city. And then number two, we wanted to make sure that we were maximizing the impact as well. And so for some neighborhoods, of course, drug activity was a big concern. In some other neighborhoods, illegal dumping was a concern. And then in some neighborhoods, it was the homicides and the shootings and things like that too. And so every neighborhood had its own sort of list of priorities and where this would be effective. And also in many of those neighborhoods, a lot of folks didn't feel too comfortable with sharing what they know as it relates to crimes being committed. And so this was another way to increase that participation as well. And so we had done a number, just prior to us doing the distribution and communications and awareness of this campaign, I had done several neighborhood block watch trainings. So we they kind of gotten back to doing some of the old school kind of organizing to reduce crime and violence in some of the neighborhoods. And so one of the things that we're doing was trying to increase local capacity to address some of these crimes. And so just so happened, Congressman Clifford's office had known about a lot of that activity that I had been doing in the neighborhoods. And so it was a natural fit for us to do the distribution, or at least work with Amazon to help identify these neighborhoods as well. And so the local neighborhood leaders were able to identify key areas within their neighborhood, is particularly specific blocks where some of that illegal activity was taking place that they really wanted to target. But then they also knew that there were neighbors that were concerned and wanted to get involved as well. And so they were able to kind of put together their own campaigns within those neighborhoods to distribute the cameras as well, and to make folks aware of the program too. I can keep going, but I'll pause for some
Okay,
questions.
so we'll kind
as
of open
well.
it up for questions.
Yeah.
I do have one question. So of course, you
Mhm.
know, we always want to know what was the outcome, how successful was the pilot program?
Yeah, I think it was very successful. And I like to highlight the fact that, you know, there were three sectors, if you will, that were really coming together around this. You had government, you had a community organization, then you had business coming together, sort of unified around a common goal, right? And so I think in that regard, it was successful. I've not heard from any resident that had a camera distributed that none of them have complained about, you know, receiving the cameras. None of them complained about being able or being contacted by law enforcement for footage or anything like that. In fact, that was one of the things that we wanted to make sure people were clear about, because just prior to us making that announcement, at least Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, along with other municipalities, that made some announcements about registering your cameras with local PD. And that was a big concern to a lot of folks, that their footage will automatically be, you know, downloaded and taken and that sort of thing. And so with a lot of the neighborhoods and us partnering and us having great relationships with a lot of those neighborhoods, we were able to tell them that, hey, number one, it would be great if the neighborhood association itself, whenever there's a crime that's committed and police department is wanting some footage, that the neighborhood will go on record as being the one releasing that footage. That way it's not the individual. And so a lot of neighborhoods love that idea and signed on for that as well. So if someone were to be, you know, and actually that protects a lot of the identities of those individuals too. So it's the neighborhood that gave the footage up, not necessarily the individual who owns the home or that's renting the home or anything like that either. And so ultimately it's been a really great success. It has definitely, from the folks that we spoken with after they've had the doorbells installed, a lot of them have called us and said, hey, just thank you for the opportunity. A lot of folks have said it has definitely increased their sense of safety in their neighborhoods as well. And in some instances, particularly when you talk about those areas where there's been illegal dumping and things like that, a lot of that has decreased in some of those neighborhoods. And one quick success story, and that I share, I mean, this happened, I would say probably a good couple of weeks or so after one of the first neighborhoods had their installation. A lady was going to her car to warm up her vehicle, and she was starting it up and everything, and forgot something and ran back in the house. And between the time it took her to come back out, someone had jumped into her car and took off. Well, it was caught on the Ring doorbell, and of course the person was caught, and the car was returned without harm as well. But it was one of those instances where she was able to identify who that person was very quickly, and they got the vehicle back as well. And so I think in that regard, it's been a success.
Okay, thank you so much. I see we have some more questions. Councilwoman Amobian.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Tell us a little bit about how these are installed and the range that they cover in terms of what they can pick up in a neighborhood, and how long do they last, and just as much as you can about that.
Yeah, so number one, the doorbell rings it was free installation. So it was a local company that Amazon contracted with to install. So it was free to the clients, to the residents of Kansas City who wanted the ring. The biggest qualifier is to make sure that the person had internet access. So you have to have internet to have it operate. And then aside from that, in terms of how long it lasts, it's really about the individual's setup. And so some folks were able to get, if you already had a doorbell installed and you're having that ring installed where that doorbell was, then you can sometimes go right into the hardwire and just hardwire it in, and there's no need to take the ring doorbell off and have it charged ever so often as well. But those who are not able to have it hardwired in, then it's battery operated, and that it depends on the settings. So some folks may have settings where it's picking up on everything from cars going by versus having it pick up on an actual person as well. So it depends on the settings, and that's the owner's preference in terms of how those settings are and how long the battery lasts. So it's all about the settings. Similar to like your cell phone, for example. If you have a bunch of notifications coming to your cell phone, or you have a bunch of apps downloaded, then it's gonna drain your battery. So it's the same thing, but you can take the battery out and recharge it and put it right back in, and it'll be fine. And so it's subject to last as long as it's been taken care of and charged properly and things like that. Did I answer all your questions?
The range of coverage, if I had one on my
that's also
Um,
also the preference of the individuals. You can change the settings on that. You can have it. It's not a very broad setting. It really just covers your parcel. So if it's your home, your front door, etc., and how you kind of set it up. So it's not going to go down your block or anything like that. It will cover what comes into the range of the actual camera itself, and those can be set.
And I'm curious because I think I may have experienced this. I went to a group home that was operated by an operator, and I rang the doorbell. She was at her house. She could see me, and I didn't realize that when I rang the doorbell that she could answer from a distance. Is that what we're talking about? She could see me and she
Yes,
could
you can
talk
be
to
at
me.
the grocery store. Yes, ma'am. You can be at the grocery store and someone rings your doorbell or comes up to your door and it'll send a notification that someone's at your door. You can hit a button and talk to them live as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and it works good for a lot of seniors too, because if you're a senior and you're slow to get to the door and you keep your phone or what have you by you, and somebody's ringing your doorbell, you can go live and tell them that you'll be right there. Or you can simply tell them that you're not interested and go home or go away.
Thank you.
Well, so yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Madam President. This may have been mentioned, but Mr. Daniel, you did speak to this. I have a Ring doorbell. One of the challenges is if you don't have it wired, is the battery.
Right.
And it can die. And the other thing is the storage. It's one thing to have it come to your phone so you can see it, but if you don't have it stored, you don't pay for that extra storage, then that information leaves. So two questions. One, battery, hot wire, these would have to be wired. If we're going to finance this as a city, we'd have to finance this where they're wired. Can't rely on the batteries because that creates another issue. People being able to have the technology or the wherewithal to know how to plug them up into a USB port, to power them back up. But the other thing is, how do you handle the storage? And then, with any technology, I have some colleagues in some cities where they have some housing developments where their cameras were hacked. And now, that technology is being held up for ransom for them to be able to get the information. So, but with technology, there always comes challenges. To Councilwoman Amobian's point, it's nice to be able to sit at work or anywhere where you have cameras and see who's coming. But when we're talking about deploying this out into the community with people who may not have the infrastructure on their own or the ability to keep up with it, that becomes a challenge. So storage, how is that covered? I would suggest if we go this route, we definitely go with the don't rely on the batteries, that we wire them. And then have any of you ever had problems with your technology or that technology being hacked? How do you handle it? So I'll leave it there. I got a couple others, but I'll wait for other councilmen to ask your questions.
Yeah, so on the storage piece, it's really about again, it's one of those things, and this is something that in hindsight we probably would have told people more about, but we leaned on Ring to really kind of explain a lot of what happens next for folks. So for example, there's a protection plan, or it's called like, for example, I went and purchased a Ring doorbell myself after this campaign. And one of the things that I did is after your first year, or I think it actually was less than that, I think it was after 90 days or something like that, you have to then purchase a plan. Now, the plan that I purchased is only $30 a year, so it's still very affordable. It's $30 a year for the plan. And that really depends on what you want, what you're gonna do with the storage itself. And that plan also impacts the length of the videos and things like that too. So some people videos are 30-second videos, some people videos are 60-second videos, some people videos are 90 seconds. All of that impacts your storage and how it does. And so the more education that people have up front about the various settings and how to set those, that also impacts their battery life as well. But it's going to be difficult. I'll say it'll be difficult to do all wires because some people have older homes that may not be compatible with some of the Rings and stuff. So in some cases you may not be able to get around it, but again, that's one of those things that when you're dealing with the persons or the company that's going to do the installation, that's one of the things to just make sure that that's kind of cleared up at the beginning before you do it as well. I thought that my home, my doorbell, but again, it could be user error because I installed it myself. I didn't lean on any company to come out to do it. So it might be user error on my part because my daughter actually, I bought her one and they have theirs wired in and it's working just fine. So every other month I'm taking mine off and recharging it. But again, I think you're right though. I think it would be, especially for seniors. I know quite a few that receive the Ring doorbell, and I couldn't imagine them doing that every month, taking it off and then charging it up, and not have, if they have, and some of them, a lot of them have some cell phones, but they're not staying up on it like they would have to with the Ring doorbell either. So that is an important point.
Okay, I see Councilman Malik's hand.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Appreciate you joining us and appreciate hearing about how this has unfolded in Kansas City, Missouri. The one thing that I was struck when we spoke on the phone was how important the community organizations were, not just in the front end, but on the back end in terms of sharing and kind of being a bridge between law enforcement and the community. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I think that, in many of the neighborhoods, so in Kansas City, Missouri Police Department particularly has what's called community interaction officers, and many of them go to the neighborhood associating meetings and things like that as well. And so a lot of those relationships with those community members and the police department were established to some degree. And I say to some degree because those who are active in the neighborhood aren't necessarily the ones that we need to be engaging sometimes as well. So when it comes to, or particularly this specific project, the police department did a lot of communication in terms of spreading the word and even helping neighborhood leaders identify key areas as well. So, them being very accommodating when it comes to talking about, areas with statistics and how the best use for these particular cameras would work was good in that regard.
Councilman Malik, Any other questions? Any other questions from any other council members at this time? Councilwoman Holland?
Thank you, Madam President. This is really interesting, Mr. Daniel. And I guess, you know, the only uncovered piece for me in all camera systems of all sizes and scales is what your sense is in terms of how this assists police officers. We'll have our opportunity, I'm sure, to talk to our own Akron Police Department and, you know, and get their idea and feedback. But you've actually worked in Kansas City. By the way, I went to college in Missouri, and you've undoubtedly had an opportunity to get some feedback. Does this feel like 2 thumbs up? Do the police feel that this is an effective tool, one that is making their jobs easier, one that is improving relationships within the community, or is it too soon to tell?
Well, I think certainly it may be too soon to tell to some degree. And I say that just because we're talking about surface issues here, in terms of the impact something like this would have on real crime, right? I mean, I use the phrase opportunity crimes because, you know, any other crimes in terms of like violent crimes, shootings, assaults and stuff like that, that's where the relationship really begins and ends with most law enforcement agencies, right? That's where they're getting people to come forward to share what they know, offering rewards and things like that, or having relationships so that people feel safe enough to where if they do come forward, they feel protected and things like that. So I think there's layers to this. I don't put a lot of stock in cameras. I put stock in people and their abilities to really develop genuine relationships where there's trust involved as well. And so in the way things are here in Kansas City, especially in areas where there's high rates of crime and violence, getting people to come forward to share what they know is crucial. Our solve rate, particularly when it comes to homicides and or violent shootings, is very low. And so cameras have not made a big impact in that regard. There have been some instances where homicides and or shootings were caught on video and that information was shared right away to law enforcement. So I think in some cases, in terms of being able to access that is one piece of it. But when you talk to prosecutors and stuff, it's great you got cameras in the video, but you still need those other pieces. So ultimately it doesn't have the impact that you would hope that it would have. You just got one piece of evidence.
Okay, thank you so much. Councilman Fusco?
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and working with us here, Mr. Daniel. How long have you had your this in place in terms of utilizing the Ring camera piece? How long has it been in place?
We launched it last year, so in July of 2020.
Good. Because that's why I'm curious about the measurables and to see where, you know, the impacts and so on and so forth. And as Mr. Malik had mentioned, you know, working with the community, I think is really pivotal. And the thing of it is, what we're seeing is some neighborhoods out there, they're taking upon themselves utilizing these cameras to take pictures of folks and hanging them on telephone poles and say, this guy's been in our or this person has been in our neighborhood, you know, and ripping people off or, you know, taking bikes, whatever the case is. But, you know, working with the community, I think is important. Obviously, it's a big piece of this. And the other thing we're gonna have to talk about offline is your Kansas City Chiefs and our Cleveland Browns, but we'll do that afterwards, okay? Just joking. Loosen up, everybody.
Wonderful.
That's a good one.
All right. So again, Mr. Daniel, we want to thank you for taking the time out and just sharing information. Great work that you're doing there in Kansas City. So thank you for what you do. Also want to thank Mr. Lagarde for taking the time out to be on this call with us. And so this is just the beginning. So council, we will continue the conversations. If there is nothing else coming before council at this time, we will adjourn. Thank you.
This is the final committee meeting of the day. Council will meet at 7 p.m. tonight. Thank you.